Good afternoon. I don't know if I have to speak much more quickly now because of that. I'm Anne-Marie Connolly and I'm Director of Health Equity and Impact with Public Health England. And as Sunand said earlier, we're a new organisation. We've only been in place since April of this year. And we bring together about 70 different organisations that existed before, kind of pulling together a new public health system where responsibilities have been placed with local government. Again, it's returning to local government for the health of the local population, and we're the organisation working between government and local government to bring together partnerships across the country to make better health for people. And I lead on health inequalities and on a programme called Healthy People and Healthy Places. So looking at the interaction between place and health. So I'm talking today about obesity, a very well observed problem, and I think people are very conscious and aware of it. And just to say a few facts and figures around that, because we do facts and figures, we do lots of facts and figures, in fact, in public health. But just to say a little bit about, in terms of when we think about overweight and obesity, we can look at about a fifth of children in reception year, a third of children in year 6, and then 2/3 of adults actually are either overweight or obese. So just to kind of highlight the size of the problem. And there are stark inequalities in the differences between who is thin and who is not. The prevalence, this is a graph just, we measure children every year and we've accumulated a lot of information about that, but we need to also help do something more about that. But just to say, the kind of maroon bars are the reception year and the blue bars are the year 6. And you can see by the time you move between reception and year 6, children have grown a lot more obese during that time. But there's also a gradient across between the least deprived areas and the most deprived areas. In fact, it's almost twofold for both of those. And just to remind everybody the impacts of obesity, it kind of impacts both on some really life-threatening conditions and also conditions that make life kind of miserable. Just in terms of thinking about the increases the prevalence of diabetes, impacts on high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, and has an influence on the incidence of cancer as well. So people don't always associate obesity with cancer, but it is another risk factor. But it also impacts on people's reproductive function, on their respiratory functioning, and on their arthritis levels as well. So mobility, disability, and premature death, really. And again, for adults, we can see the levels between men and women there, and there is some degree of a gradient as well across between those with no qualifications and those with very high level education status. Just to say, I don't know if anybody here has heard of the Foresight report on obesity. This was a government, yes, I see a hand in there, good. This is a Office of the Government Office of Science review, and it is a number of years ago, but it's still a great document, kind of an introduction to thinking about how we plan for the future in terms of the impacts of obesity. And the little squiggly diagrams there are just to say about the interconnection of energy inputs and outputs and how that might relate to the individual. But the report was taking a long-term view and actually considering different policy scenarios and looking at the interdependencies and influences and obviously some solutions. Now they came up, because they looked at different scenarios, they had different types of policy responses. So on a balance between all of those, these are top 5. Now this is a very simplistic way of actually saying what came out of that report, but their very top one, no matter which policy scenario you looked at, was about increasing walkability and cyclability of the built environment. And also you see number 3 is also controlling the availability or exposure to obesogenic foods and drinks, and obviously that's the environment in which obesogenic food and drinks are actually sold and produced and manufactured and distributed as well. And I say that's a bit simplistic because this is actually the diagram of how they thought about the interdependencies. And that brought together those about the individual in terms of their physical activity, their personal psychology, their consumption, but also the wider environmental issues about environmental physical access to physical activity, wider social psychology and wider patterns of consumption as well. And the darker lines give a kind of very an indication of the strength of the impact of the different interconnecting parts. So it's a kind of, it looks like a spaghetti, but they did try to make some sense out of this, but recognising the complexity of how we've got to a position where we have such levels of obesity. So we in the public health world, but many of you here may have also seen this diagram before, but it's trying to make a little bit more coherence about how we think about place, people and health. And it's a variation. It was originally brought out in terms of the determinants of health, and this is a kind of the terms of health and well-being in neighbourhoods, with the people at the centre of this, and linking in with their own individual life, community, personal lifestyle, but actually thinking about how the wider built natural environment actually interacts with how people live their personal lives. So, but in recognising that, this is a slide from the Marmot Review on terms of the determinants of health inequalities. It's actually people do live in different areas in relative terms, with variations in favourable environmental conditions. Looking again between the least deprived and most deprived areas, you can see those who are living with environmental sort of adverse conditions, which may be anything about water quality, air quality, green space, housing conditions, living next to landfill and so on. And of course across the that sort of gradation of deprivation, you'll see far more adverse living conditions depending on where you're living, but they're all highly relevant to actually your chances of good health and good health and well-being outcomes. With the new public health system, we've also got something called a public health outcomes framework, and it's about 64 different indicators looking from anything about the determinants, wider determinants of health, to personal activities and lifestyles, to health protection issues, and then finally what people die of. But a few of those, we're able to now start to map some of these indicators across the country and look at the variation between, and this is one on physical activity, and just to say, obviously environments where people are able to walk and cycle do make an impact on public health. And this is also about the chances of utilising an outdoor space for exercise and health varies across the country as well, and obviously it's impacted on socioeconomic status from BME communities and so on. So, but the England average is only about 15% according to our figures. It's also a variation about self-reported well-being, which does have a major interconnection with where people live. And I was just thinking about what we have done as a society in terms of creating places to live and housing people. I think we've, when we've needed rapid access and functional buildings to house our families, but I think we've hopefully moved on a little bit since these times, but there is still much to be learned and much to be done in terms of making those places where people live and interact and take exercise and interconnect better. We've had the car, the kind of dominance of the car, and where the sort of prioritised over access and interconnections and transport for people, and where people live or play aren't always conducive to having that physical activity, having that exercise, having that chance to interconnect with each other that might well help with problems such as obesity. The public health system has changed at a time. There's also changing to planning regulation. Now, some may see it as a good thing or a bad thing, a new planning framework, but at least it actually starts to say something about promoting healthy communities. It's in there. It's what we actually do to actually use that in the best possible way to maximise chances in terms of new developments, changes to places, and how high quality public space is developed that actually encourages active and continual use of that public space. So interesting what Anna's saying, in terms of what is defined as that public space. And together with the Town and Country Planning Association, we've been looking at how we do start to join up that health and planning world, and how we start to use new hooks and levers within the system as well to join those up. Now that public health people are in local government, we still don't quite know how to talk to each other, just simple language. I was actually a bit nervous about how to talk to architects as well today. So in terms of we all have our own kind of professional speak and say how do we talk when we're talking about health but we're moving forward and trying to bring those professions together at local level, national level, and those who might have an interest and an impact on health. I was really pleased to recently be at the launch of the Landscape Institute. It was actually their first publication about health and the landscape, and just to see in that number 2 and 3, they're talking about healthy places and overcome and promote healthy lifestyles, and also making people feel comfortable and at ease, and that safety issue, and that making people feel they could go out and interconnect with people they don't really know but feel safe and comfortable sitting by them and interacting with them. There is a lot of information about active travel and what the importance of that in terms of interconnection with obesity and encouraging people to be more active, and how we think about the design that enables people to be more active. But we still have a dominance of the separation of the people from transport, separation of people from where they live, from where they work, and where they live from where they interconnect with friends and families. And so we are working to think about how we continue to develop places that actually support a more active form of transport, because if you can embed physical activity in your everyday life, it is at least as effective as if you're going to the gym or your sports and physical activity, and it's probably cheaper and more amenable to a lot more people as well. We're also considering talking about how we access healthy foods as well, and what does that mean in terms of newer worlds and how the towns, cities, suburbs and so on are being designed. There's a lot of attention at the moment on regulating fast food outlets and what the design of the high street is, and a particular focus on these high energy, high density fast foods. Although that, tackling that will not solve the problem of obesity, but it might be just one element of a complex set of interconnecting factors that are actually leading to the level of overweight and obesity that we're actually seeing. But it's also how do you design out these fast food outlets and design in healthier foods and healthier opportunities, and make it more normal to eat healthier foods. Okay. So thinking about that. So I will conclude. So just to say, really, where and how people live is actually very closely connected to the health they experience, and it is an important determinant of physical and mental well-being as well. And the obesity is a physical problem, but it's not. It is interconnected with your mental well-being as well. And there is a gradient in the experience of physical place and the distribution of obesity and of the distribution of the determinants of obesity. And so a whole range of issues that I mentioned before is that changing our obesity rates is about lots of marginal gain in many different dimensions. It's not, there's no single, silver bullet, there's no single silver pill about it, but it's actually bringing together the factors that can help people live those lives that actually rebalance that energy intake versus output problem that we actually have. So it's about green spaces, blue spaces, it's about social interaction, it's about living streets and spaces, it's about good food, and it is about all of those interconnecting so that we have a chance to live healthier lives. So just reminding ourselves of maybe this might be a little bit what it looks like. So say thank you.